But what really appealed to me about Kvaratskhelia, and I think a lot of people who first watched him in that Champions League campaign, when Napoli really should have done better than they did, or in that Serie A title-winning season rather, it was the fact that he looked really different. Like, you don't want to get into like a conversation about how like Pep Guardiola's ruined Jack Grealish or whatever, but most footballers, when you watch like elite football, whether that's Premier League, Champions League, or like the top echelons of the Bundesliga and Serie A, La Liga and Liga, everyone kind of does the same stuff. Like, you can just about guess what a player is going to do in any given moment. And there are some exceptions. Grealish would be one. Luis Diaz is probably another. Like, there's a degree of unpredictability in some players. But a lot of the time, the stuff that you're watching is roughly something you've seen before. Like, it's systematized, it's automatized, it's slightly predictable. And that doesn't mean it's not spectacular, it doesn't mean it's not enjoyable, but there's very few players who do things that you are not expecting. And Kvaratskhelia, at that stage, did stuff you weren't expecting literally all the time. So he could at times, obviously plays as a left winger, and he would at times like look like an orthodox, old-fashioned left winger who would, try and hit the byline, cut back and cross as he is right-footed. Other times he'd on these like mad skating runs through the middle and hurdle over like all these sliding tackles coming in, which is not something you really see in football anymore, like a winger deciding, right, I'm just going to go straight towards the goal and see what happens. There was a game, I can't remember who it was against, where might have been Lazio, he scored one goal like that, where he kind of slalomed in between two or three people. And then 5 minutes later, he was 35 yards out and he just thought, I'm going to shoot. And I think he hit the post with one of those, similar to that, you remember the Suarez one against Arsenal?
Yeah.
Like a similarly stupid shot, like the sort of thing that the XG guy in the background is going, don't shoot. And I just hadn't. It sounds like he's just doing footballer stuff, but I hadn't at the time, and I still haven't now really seen a player who seemed so like virtuoso, so free of a system. It was very obvious that he'd had this really unusual route into the top echelon of European football. And it was incredibly refreshing. I think at the time I was probably a bit bored of watching the same stuff most of the time, that kind of Guardiola-light style. A little bit of pressing here, inverted wingers, fullback comes into midfield, oh, isn't it clever and subtle? And you just wanted someone who was a little bit more maverick, a little bit more kind of idiosyncratic, to do stuff that you didn't really see, and that was Kvaratskhelia. No, I think he is the sort of player who would get people off their feet, because there is still a little bit of that kind of freedom in him, that maverick streak. He is quite spectacular to watch when, socks around the ankles, always a good sign. Flying in from the wing. He runs and he's got that real kind of wild running energy. It's a bit like having a horse on the pitch. Like, it's not like some footballers run in a really controlled way. Like, you can tell that athletes have been told this is the best gait, whereas Kvaratskhelia is a little bit more like flailing. And I think that's quite exciting to watch. He does unexpected things. He does brilliant things. I think there is no question to me that he is the sort of, it's exactly the sort of player Liverpool should be looking at. He's exactly the sort of player that you think, okay, if you didn't have Cody Gakpo and Luis Diaz, you would want Kvaratskhelia to be your left winger. He'd be one of those, I think, in that kind of conversation. The difficulty is I just don't quite see why they'd spend a lot of money on another player who plays in that position unless they've got an idea of how he could play.